So I worked out that in the next few weeks, the only share when we can stay with the Parsha, when we haven't got something else very overwhelming in our lives, like Yom Yerushalayim or Shavuot or HaOmer, is this week. So this week we're going to talk about something which is in the Parsha, but we're right in the middle of it anyway, which is Sefirat HaOmer. So I'm just getting my sheet. And I wanted to dedicate the shir today for Ashlema, for two people, for Oren Meir HaKohen Ben Yudit Gittel, for Dvora Nisa Bat Etel, and for Dina Bat Psia, and it should be a refuah for all of them. Okay. So if we look in this week's Parsha, and we are going to do that right now, I'm not going to go all the way through the Parsha and pick out everything for you because I'm going to focus on one thing this week. So we all think of Parshat Emor. It's so good that you can see me at the same time as you can see the sheets. It's wonderful. When we think of Parshat Emor, what's the first thing we think of? What's let's unmute for a second, Aliza. What's the first thing we think of in Parshat Emor? Maybe Aliza's gone away. Manage participants. Unmute. What's the first thing you think of in Parshat Emor? You can all talk now.
I'm fine, that's fine. Please, I'm tired.
Everybody's asleep. You're not used to having to talk in this shit. Parshat Emor starts with Emor el HaKohanim, and it tells you about the Kohanim not being able to go to a Bet Kvarot, not being able to go to a Levaya, not being able to attend to the purity that Kohanim have to maintain in their lives. It talks about the level of purity that people have to, that Kohanim have to maintain in order to be able to eat truma. It talks about how sacrifices have to be whole and perfect, and the Kohanim also have to be whole and perfect. But somewhere in the middle of all of that, and this is the main thing that we think of when we think about Parshat Emor, is the list of all the Chagim, starting from Shabbat and continuing through from Pesach until basically the end of the year. And it's Vayikra Perek Kaf Gimel. Ele Moadei Hashem Mikra'ei Kodesh Asher Tikra'u Otam B'Moadam. I'm going to mute you all again because you're not saying anything anyway. Let's take this away. Okay. And we start off with Chag HaMatzot, and we go right through until Chag HaSukkot. And obviously in that list of Chagim, if you start from Pesach, the next thing that you come to is Shavuot. And the one place in the Torah where we have the description of how we count Sefirat HaOmer, which is psukim that we're saying every single day at the moment now, if we're counting, and Bezrat Hashem we're counting. Come in this week's Parsha. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Emor. You have them in front of you now on my sharing the screen with me. דבר בני ישראל ואמרת אליהם כי תבואו אל הארץ אשר אני נותן לכם וקצרתם את קצירה והבאתם את עומר ראשית קצירכם אל הכהן. First of all, you're supposed the psukim start off with the sacrifice. It's not really a sacrifice. The offering of the first of the barley harvest. והניף את העומר לפני השם לרצונכם, ממחרת השבת יניפנו הכהן. And the psukim tell us, when can you start bringing this offering? From the day after Mochorat HaShabbat. And there is an enormous controversy about what day does that mean. What is Mochorat HaShabbat? What would we instinctively assume that Mochorat HaShabbat is? What does Shabbat mean when we hear the word Shabbat? Again,
we think
Mochorat HaShabbat means, you can unmute yourselves now. If you have an answer, I'm not going to do it.
It means Shabbat, the day, seventh day of the week, the day of rest.
Right. So you'd assume that it means. So that's great, Dana, because you've given us two possibilities. By explaining Shabbat as a day of rest, you've given us either the possibility that it means the day after the Yom Tov, which has just been celebrated, the first day of Chag HaMatzot, or that it means the classic day of rest, which is Shabbat. But really, when we read Mimochorat HaShabbat, pshat, 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 what's the first thing that comes to mind? What would you assume it means? The day after Shabbos, right?
Yes, the seventh day of the week.
So just bear in mind that this duality, that this possibility of understanding in two different ways exists. And then so there's the first, on this day, and we're not going to decide at the moment which day it is, although we know perfectly well which day does our practice, which day do we, on which way do we observe this? We observe this when do we start counting, and we don't know yet that there's any counting involved if we're just reading the psukim. When do we start? We start the day after Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. If you're in, if most of us have we all have the memory of second night Seder, and part of second night Seder is counting the Omer. Okay. ועשיתם ביום הנבחם את העומר כבש תמים בין שנתו לעולה להשם. There's a special korban associated with bringing the Omer, bringing what is the Omer? Let's first ask ourselves, what is Omer? So Omer means a measure of a measure of grain. And we don't know yet which kind of grain we're even talking about. We don't know because we don't live in an agricultural society, and it's not absolutely obvious to us what's happening agriculturally at the time of Chag Pesach. But they, or at the time, or any agricultural ancient society would absolutely know. So let's see how long the psukim take before they tell us where we're up to in the year. ועשיתם ביום הנבחם את העומר כבש, ומנחתו, and we bring a meal offering with it, פסוק י"ג, ולחם וכלי וכרמל לא תאכלו עד עצם היום הזה, עד הביאכם את קורבן אלוקיכם, חוקת עולם לדורותיכם, בכל מושבותיכם. For us, this is a chumrah we don't live with. But strictly speaking, and again, this is something that people experience in their daily lives, all the way through all the way through Beit Rishon and Beit Sheni, until you brought the Omer to the Mikdash, you wouldn't eat the new Tvuah. Now there is so you would eat dried grain you would eat, you use the flour which had been ground before Pesach, and theoretically you'd got rid of, how good is that flour if it's from before Pesach? And you wouldn't use any flour from the new grains. And only after you brought the Omer offering into the Mikdash would you be able to go home and use what you'd just now brought in from the field. And suddenly your flour is fresh, clean flour. You don't have to go checking your flour in the same way. You don't go expecting to find worms and insects and mold in your flour, and everything is suddenly clean and new and delicious as opposed to second rate. So the Omer, bringing the korban, moves you onto a new part of the year. Okay. And that's it. That's in this pasuk Yudalad. V'lechem v'kali v'charmel lo tochlu ad etzem hayom hazeh. You cannot eat bread or dried grain or wheat kernels or barley grain kernels at all until this day, until you bring this offering to the Mishkan, to the Mikdash. And then what do you do? And then you start counting. From the first day when you can bring legitimately the Omer offering to the Mikdash, mimochorat Shabbat, from the day after the Shabbat, miyom haviachem et Omer hatnufa, from the day which for you is really important because that's the day when you can start you could imagine the queues. Imagine it's like the Mishkan or the Mikdash is like a bakery. And everybody is desperate to bring in to hand in their measure of barley so that they can go rushing home and make their new bread. And there's a long queue outside the Mikdash, all the way every day. There's a traffic jam every day from the first day of after Mochrat HaShabbat until everybody's finished bringing this first Omer. And you start counting those days. Sheva Shabbatot Tmimot Tiena, you count 7 full weeks. Ad Mimochorat HaShabbat HaShvi'it, until the day after the 7th Shabbat. Now, what does it sound like from that 7th Shabbat? Does it sound like we're talking about a Yom Tov? Or does it sound like we're talking about a Shabbat, a 7th day of the week? You can see how strong the argument is for interpreting this as the day after Shabbat. Because this is not when do you stop counting? After you've counted 7 Shabbatot. Tisperu 50 yom. And that makes it from 49 days to 50 days. V'ikravtem mincha chadasha la'Hashem, and then you bring another offering. Mimoshvotechem taviu lechem tnufa. 12 lechem tnufa 2. What do you bring? What's this new offering? And this is not the Omer offering. This is a different offering. This is the offering of shtei lechem, of 2 loaves of bread. And what are they made from? We'll see in a minute. Shnei esronim solet tiena, they have to be made from 2, however much an isaron is, of fine flour. chametz te'afena. They have to be, they have to rise and then be baked. Bikurim la'Hashem. What korban are we talking about? We're talking about the korban shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread of wheat, which are brought to the mikdash on Chag HaShavuot. וקראתם בעצם היום הזה מקרא קודש יהיה לכם. This day will be a holy day. כל מלאכת עבודה לא תעשו. Don't do any work. חוקת עולם בכל מושבותיכם לדורותיכם. And this is an everlasting law in all your dwellings for all your generations. And then I just want to see that the next pasuk adds a completely, what you would think is a completely unrelated law. And when you harvest your land, don't completely finish reaping the corner of your field, when you reap. And the droppings of your harvest you shall not gather up. Leave them for the poor and for the stranger. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your God. Okay. What is the connection between this pasuk and all the psukim which have gone before when we're talking about bringing the Omer and counting the days from Chag HaPesach to Chag HaShavuot? I am unmuting you now. Why is this pasuk here? Nearly everything in these psukim, in this section of Parshat Emor, is about the Chagim. This is not about the Chagim. This is about when you harvest your field. So what's it doing here? Anybody?
You don't want to have harvest every day. You want to leave some over because that is the essence of being a person.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you very well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
You want to, sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
You want to harvest. You don't want to harvest everything. You want to leave something for people who need it. It's a form of tzedakah. It's a form of an essence of who we are.
Okay. I think that your answer's not very different. I'm going to mute everyone again. The difference between, this is not really a random chok, which is a random law which is put in here. It's absolutely connected to the time of the year that we're talking about. Because from Chag HaPesach to Chag HaShavuot, which we think of as a dead time of year. Why do we think of it as a dead time of year? Because we see it as a mourning period. We don't have weeks filled with smachot, which we wouldn't be going to at the moment anyway, because you can't have more than 20 people. We find that our days are much more finally routine, and our evenings are much freer in this time of the year than we think of than the rest of the year. But for in an agricultural society, from Pesach till Shavuot, nobody breathes, because this is the time of year that you're bringing in your harvest. And not only do you have to, there's always a tremendous rush to harvest the wheat, first the barley, which is Pesach, and then the wheat, because as opposed to fruit which hangs on the trees and waits for you, and vegetables which are underneath the ground and you dig them up. Wheat and barley stand in the field, and from the moment that they're ready, if a rainstorm comes along, and it's supposed to rain sometime this week, and you haven't harvested, and your barley or your wheat was ready in the field, then forget it. It's lost. It's gone. You've lost your harvest. So as soon as you can harvest the ears of grain which is standing waiting for you, that would be your first priority. That's what everybody's rushing to do. And these days of the barley harvest, and then what are we essentially doing when we count Sefirat HaOmer? We're basically counting the days from the barley harvest starting from the first day you can go out and harvest your fields, which is, according to our interpretation, the first day after Chag Pesach, the first day of Pesach, until Chag Shavuot, when 7 weeks later, when the wheat is standing ready in the field. And the beautiful place to see this is in Megillat Ruth, where if you look in the second source on the sheets, the story basically runs from one harvest to the other harvest. First of all, there are just some beautiful ironies in Megillat Ruth. It's one of the richest and most beautiful, from a literary sense, parts of the Tanakh. It starts off by telling us that there is a ra'av ba'aretz, vayelech ish mi bet lechem. There is hunger in the land, and a man goes out from the house of bread. Bet lechem ought to be the place of plenty. And instead, it's full of ra'av, it's full of hunger. And then when after the tragedy has hit the family of Elimelech, and Naomi is left by herself with her 2 daughters-in-law, and she hears that the famine is over, and she decides to come back to Eretz Yisrael. When did they come? Perek Aleph Pasuk Yud Tet. Vatelachna shtehen ad bo'ana Bet Lechem. The 2 of them walked until they came to Bethlehem. And I'm just going to skip to the end. V'hem ba'u Bethlehem b'tchila ktsir se'orim. They arrive in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, which is right after Pesach. And we all know the story. Ruth and Naomi finding themselves destitute. Ruth goes out to take advantage of this halacha that we read in conjunction with Sefirat HaOmer. It's a halacha which is part of Sefirat HaOmer, basically. When you're busy harvesting, leave behind part of your field for the poor and the hungry. So Ruth goes to take advantage of that, and she goes to glean in the field of Boaz. And this is a society which would have brought their Omer to the Mishkan in Shiloh immediately after Chag Pesach, and then only then would they be able to eat freely from the new bread from the new harvest. And we can see that when Ruth sits down to eat together with Boaz, having been recognized by him and expressed her gratitude to him, and being invited to join in the reapers meal, ויאמר לו בועז בעת האוכל, גושי הלום ואכלת מן הלחם וטבלת פיתך בחומץ. Eat from the bread, dip your bread in the vinegar, ותשב בקצת הקצות הקוצרים. And she sat down with this invitation. She sits down beside the reapers, ויצבט לה קולי, and he tore off a piece of the dried kali is some kind of roasted barley granules. I think we might recognize it as granola. Vatochal vatispa vatotam. And she ate, and she was satisfied, and she had left over. But Boaz's invitation to Ruth to eat from the lechem and to have some of the kali is a direct result of the fact that Korban HaOmer had already been brought, and this new bread and new grain is now mutar, whereas before it had been asur. Vatokam lelaket, and Ruth gets up to glean. Vayitzav Boaz et ne'arav lemor gam ben ha'omarim tilaket. Let her gather not just from the part of the field which we've left aside for the poor reapers, but ben ha'omarim, in the regular part of the field where we've piled up the piles of grain which we've already harvested. V'lo tachlimuha, and don't shame her. V'gam shol tasholu la min hatzvatim. And as you reap and you gather up sheaves of grain, deliberately drop pieces from your sheaves, ve'azavtem, and leave them, ve'likta, ve'lo tigaru ba, and let her glean them and don't rebuke her. V'tilaket basadeh ad ha'arev, and she gathered in the field until the evening. V'tachpot et asher liketha, and she threshed what she'd gathered. Vayhi ke'efat se'orim, and what she had was an ephah of barley. And this is it's Megillat Ruth, which makes it clear to us that the Omer we're talking about in Parshat Emor is an Omer of barley. And then towards the end of Perek Bet in Ruth, Vatidbak benarot Boaz lilkot, Ruth continued to glean with the handmaidens of Boaz, ad klot k'tzir ha'seorim u'k'tzir ha'chitim, until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest. Vateshevet chomota, and she only went back to live with Naomi at the end of all that period, which means that all the way through Sefirat HaOmer, from Mochorat HaShabbat until Chag HaShavuot, Ruth is essentially living on with Boaz's workers next to his field. So that's just a great way to see the mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer playing out in ancient society. The rush of and the busyness of the K'tzir HaSeorim carrying on all the way through Sefirat HaOmer until Chag HaShavuot, until K'tzir HaLechem, K'tzir HaChitim. And by counting the days, you are making them special. Usfartem lachem. What do we count? What does God count? If we think about it, then Sefer Shmot begins by telling us Ve'ele Shmot Bnei Yisrael, and Rashi asks, why does God bother bringing all the names of Bnei Yisrael HaYordim Mitzrayim who come down to Egypt? Why does he detail every single one? Because they're important to him. In Sefer Bamidbar, when Moshe is commanded to count all of Bnei Israel twice. Why are they being counted? Why are they being counted? Because they're important to God. And in the same way, the days of Sefirat HaOmer in ancient society, every single day counts. every day has to be filled with activity. Every day is important. Every day you have to bring in as much as you can of the riches which are out there in the field, and you have to make sure that every day is used to its maximum. So the act of counting those days makes them special, precious, makes them really count. What is an agricultural society? What happens when our society stops being an agricultural society, and the days from Sefirat HaOmer and from the barley harvest to the wheat harvest no longer count in the same way? So that is, two things happen. The first thing that happens is in the Middle Ages, in Europe, the days from after Pesach until Shavuot are the days when armies go out to fight. And so from being a period of anticipation and simcha and joy at bringing in the fruits of your labors, it becomes a period of fear, because this is when the armies, the soldiers are in the field, and this is when ordinary people feel themselves at risk. And this is also the period in which communities in Europe were decimated from the Crusades from the time of the Crusades onwards, and it became, as a result, it became a mourning period. And with all the halachot of what we think of as Hilchot Sefirat HaOmer, what are really the halachot of Sefirat HaOmer? To leave your wheat in the field for the poor, and to deliberately and to leave behind the parts of your harvest that you drop on along the way. Those are the halachot of Sefirat HaOmer. What have become the halachot of Sefirat HaOmer? Not to have smachot, not to have weddings, not to enjoy, not to go to musical events, etc., etc. Isn't it amazing how the character of a time of the year can be completely overturned and inverted? How it can become exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to be. And isn't it interesting that in our time, gradually what is happening to these days of Sefirat HaOmer? First, we introduce Yom HaAtzmaut. It has sad days and happy days. It has Yom HaGvura v'HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, Lag BaOmer, Yom Yerushalayim, until Shavuot. And gradually the character of these days is changing for us. And gradually happiness is being mixed in with the residual mourning left over from Galut. And this is a very, very interesting process. And I think the way that we look at and experience Sefirat HaOmer is definitely changing. Okay. I want to go now and look at the big controversy about Sefirat HaOmer, which divided society not in Bayit Rishon, but in Bayit Sheni. And I want you to look with me at the sheet. And this is from an article by David Henshiker, who's a professor in Bar Ilan. And it's a description of the argument between Pharisees and the Dead Sea sect. about the day of when you start Sefirat HaOmer. Okay, so we're down here. The Pharisees held that the wave offering of new barley, i.e. Korban HaOmer, was to be harvested and brought on the 16th day of the first month, Nisan, the day after the first day of Pesach. That means that the Prushim, which is who we think of as Chazal, and on whose interpretation of the Torah, which is Torah Shebaal Peh, our kind of Yadut is based. They said, and they held, that Mochorat HaShabbat means the day after Chag HaPesach, which is literally the first opportunity to go out into your field and harvest the barley harvest. You don't wait. You don't take the risk that it might rain during Chol HaMoed. This year it rained during Chol HaMoed. It rained immediately. The Shabbat after Pesach, it rained. Let's imagine if this year we had our barley harvest in the field. And let's imagine for a second that we weren't Prushim, but we were Kat Midbar Yehuda. The sect who left Yerushalayim sometime in the middle of the period of the Hasmoneans and went to live near Yam HaMelach in Qumran. And they left because they had very deep-seated disagreements with the way halakha was being observed in the Mikdash. And this disagreement is one of the disagreements that sent them out from Yerushalayim to the Midbar. Sectarian halakha, that's the halakha of Kat Midbar Yehuda, for its part held that the Omer offering was to be made on Sunday, i.e. the day after the literal Shabbat following the entire Passover week, which date fell permanently, according to the sect's solar calendar, which we're going to talk about in a minute, on the 26th day of Nisan. Because, now we'll talk a second about the fact that why they knew which day of the week it would always be. But just imagine this year, okay? You have your barley in the field and you're waiting to harvest it. And all the way through Chol HaMoed, you have to sit shtum. You can't go and harvest. You can't use your barley. And Chol HaMoed passes, and you celebrate the seventh day of Pesach. And then you have to wait this year, right? It would have been another day, Friday, and Shabbat. And then you'd be saying to yourself all the way through that Shabbat, it's okay, I can go and harvest on Sunday. And then what happened this year on that Shabbat? It poured with rain. And all your barley harvest would have been ruined. Do you see how the Kat Midbar Yehuda, one of the differences between Kat Midbar Yehuda and everybody else was they were really seriously from. Charedim are nothing compared with Kat Midbar Yehuda. They had rules about their contact with women. They had rules about who they mixed with. They had rules about who they touched. They had rules about who they ate with. They went to the mikveh before they ate. They went to the mikveh 3 times a day, probably, because they went to the mikveh also before they studied. And well, you know what? There are parts of our society who take that kind of lifestyle on as an extra, as an extra chumrah. The people go to the mikveh before davening. People go to the mikveh before Chag. Beseder. But in Kat Midbar Yehuda, it was taken to unbelievable extremes. And one of the things they would have done was they would have waited an extra week after everybody else before they went out and harvested their barley. Now you could say big deal, they lived in the middle of the desert. And what kind of barley harvest could they have in the middle of the desert? So they didn't care that they were ruining the agricultural, or they were taking an enormous agricultural risk. Maybe that's one of the reasons that they left normal life in Yerushalayim or elsewhere in Eretz Israel and went to live in the Midbar, where you certainly can't have a normal agricultural cycle. I'm coming back to this quotation from Hanshake. So they would always, the day after the literal Sabbath following the entire Passover week, which date fell permanently on the 26th day of Nisan, and initiated, they would only start counting the 50-day count, making the 15th of Sivan, the third month, the date of the festival of the weeks, the Chag HaShavuot, and the offering of Shnei Alesim of the 2 loaves. So they also had, as well as having a disagreement about when you start counting Sefirat HaOmer, they also disagreed with everybody else about what date you celebrate Chag HaShavuot. And it's very, very interesting to see that they are one of the things we don't have in the Torah is when the Torah talks about Chag HaShavuot, it only talks about the harvest. It only talks about it in its agricultural context. It never tells us that this date is Chag Matan Torah. Where does that start? It's mentioned in the Gemara, fine, but where is the earliest place that we have a record of it? And it would seem that the earliest example of associating Chag HaShavuot with Chag Matan Torah, but of saying that the day when essentially equating the days of counting the Omer, the agricultural count, with the days of counting from Yetziat Mitzrayim to Matan Torah, which Am Yisrael would have been counting as well because they would have been waiting for it, except that they didn't know when it was going to be. The first place where that association is made is the Book of Jubilees, which is part of the Sfarim Chitzonim. It's called Sefer Yovlot in Hebrew, and a copy of fragments of this book have been found in Qumran as part of the library of the Dead Sea Sect. And we also have that's the Sefer Yovlot, which we have in Hebrew. And we also have Sefer Yovlot which has come down as part of Sfarim HaChitzonim. Okay, so here you see where it says Book of Jubilees, chapter 6, verse 21. This is a quotation in translation from this book, which is all about what things happened in the Yovel. And it talks about Chag HaShavuot in this chapter. And what it says is the following: for it is, Shavuot, the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruits, Shavuot and Bikurim. This feast is twofold and of a double nature. And researchers of the Book of Jubilees asked, what does it mean by saying twofold and of a double nature, of saying that it has two meanings? And this is how Hanshake, in this continuation of the same article, explains it. The author of Jubilees thus wished to impart the additional meaning he believed the festival to possess, over and above the explicit one in the Bible, not only a first fruits festival, an agricultural celebration, but a festival of oaths. You see what he's doing? He's interpreting, he's reading not Shavuot, but Shvuot. Not weeks, but Shvuot with a Shva, meaning oaths, as in Shvuah, a promise, a brit. And what are they referring to when they read Shavuot? Not when they call the Chag, not Chag HaShavuot, but Chag HaShvuot. And notice what do we call it? When we talk about the Chag in an Ashkenazi Havara, we call it Shavuos, right? And that's with the Shva, that's Shavuot. The same way that Kat Midbar Yehuda referred to it. because it's obvious to us that Shavuot is also Chag Matan Torah. And on Chag Matan Torah, there was a Shvuah. There was an oath taken, the covenantal oath sworn by the Israelites, where on the day of the giving of the law, on the day they accepted Aseret HaDibrot. And this is the first place where we have a clear association between Chag Matan Torah and Chag HaShavuot. And to see it in the Pintelep, right? In the difference between a Kamatz and a Shvat, right? I just think is a tremendous interpretation. Okay. Now I ask myself, why would the Dead Sea sect prefer Shavuot to be on the 16th of the month instead of the 6th of the month? If you think about it, what other Chagim do we celebrate in the middle of the month? I am.
Pesach.
Yeah. What other Chagim do we celebrate in the middle of the month?
Yeah, Pesach.
Pesach.
Pesach is on the 15th.
And
And there's another one.
Yes, Sukkot.
Sukkot is also on the 15th. Essentially, by moving Shavuot over to the 16th, 15th, 16th of the month, you're moving it to be in step with Pesach and Sukkot, which are, and it should be similar to Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot, you would think, because like Pesach and Sukkot, what is Shavuot? Aliyah L'Regel. And what time of the month is Aliyah L'Regel in Sukkot and Shavuot and Pesach? It's in the middle of the month when there is a full moon. And there's an idea that Am Yisrael celebrates its Chagim with the full moon.
I think they're
So
right.
so Kat Midbar Yehuda celebrated Shavuot with a full moon in the same way as they celebrated Sukkot and Pesach with a full moon. And that's a very interesting difference. I'm not saying that it's that we should be changing the date of Shavuot, but I'm just interesting to know that there were people who thought that it was more important that the Chag should be at the same time of year as Sukkot and Pesach, than that it should be at the first possible opportunity in step with when you started your barley harvest. Because they, instead of counting from 50 days from the day after Pesach and landing up on Vav Sivan, they counted 50 days from Kaf Vav, from the 26th of Nisan, and that landed them up in the middle, dead in the middle of Chodesh Sivan, at the full moon, when you can imagine that the Chagigot in the Mikdash in the full moon are very different to Chagigot, to the celebrations in the Mikdash, if there are any celebrations at nighttime. And we know in Beit Sheni, on Sukkot certainly, there were celebrations in the Mikdash at nighttime. And the fact that they happened at the full moon was a very useful thing, because there was a limit to how much light you could create with torches and burning lanterns. So that's just like an extra aspect of the way Shavuot was celebrated by most of Am Yisrael, presumably, and this small minority who went and took themselves off into Midbar Yehuda. If we look back at, if I remind you of something that Hanshikem mentioned in his description of the Kat Midbar Yehuda's celebration of Chag HaShavuot, he refers to the sect's solar calendar. Right, it's over here. The date fell permanently according to the solar calendar, on the 26th day of Nisan, which was always a Sunday. Now, if you look down a little bit down to the end of this sheet, I brought you a piece of an article that's on the way to people who are subscribers to Skula and seems to be stuck in the post right now. An article about when people started to use hours, when people started to divide the day into hours. And part of the article talks about the Qumran sect and their calendar. So we're just gonna look at this together. The Qumran text seems to be based on a lunar calendar of 354 days. Its months range from 29 to 30 days, creating a 10-day time lag behind the solar year, which it estimates at 364 days. To synchronize the two calendars, an extra month of 30 days was added every third year. This is in a book called Sefirat, and it bases itself on two different calendars, a lunar calendar and a solar calendar. But the Qumran community used this calendar, and the they based themselves mostly on the solar calendar towards the end of the Second Temple period. And what they liked about it was the fact that it had, he looked down here, apart from its easy synchronization with the lunar calendar, this one had two more significant advantages. 364 is divisible by 4, making all 4 seasons equal in length. It's also a multiple of 7, allowing for exactly 52 weeks in a year. As a result, each date in the month falls on the same day of the week. Okay? You always, as opposed to us, who are always trying to work out which day of the week is Leil HaSeder. How are we going to sort ourselves out this year? Which day of the week is Chag HaSukkot? How does that reflect on the number of work days in the month? They always knew. The 15th of the month was always, or the 15th of Nisan was always a Wednesday. The 15th of Tishrei was always a Wednesday. And the 26th of Sivan, when they started counting the Omer, was always a Sunday. And they never, ever, ever had a situation where you had Chag and Shabbat together. Shabbat was always, their week started on Wednesday and finished on Thursday, and Shabbat was in the middle. They built up towards Shabbat from the beginning of the week and dropped down away from it at the end of the week. And I'm going to show you now, and Aliza also sent it to you, a diagram of what their calendar looked like. Okay, this is a diagram that we created in Skula a few years ago. And it's a visual representation of what the calendar of Kat Midbar Yehuda looks like. And as you can see, it's based on a perfect square. Each quarter of the year is exactly the same length. Spring starts from the 1st of Nisan and goes to the 30th of Sivan. They always have 30 days in a month, and in order to balance the year, they have an extra day at the end of each season. This little pink over here, and over here, and there's another one over here, and another one on the at the end over there, which you can't see, was a day which didn't belong to the year. And they said special mizmorim on those days, and they were extra careful on those days because they were sort of days that belonged to nothing. Okay, but what you can also see is that Pesach, which was the 15th of Nisan, was a Wednesday, and Sukkot, which is Tishrei up here, on the 15th, was also a Wednesday, and they celebrated Shavuot on the 16th of the month, the 16th of Sivan, which would have been a Monday. But they never ever had Chag on Shabbat, because as far as they were concerned, that was and again, this was another one of their big issues with what was going on in the Mikdash. You were never supposed to have korbanot for Shabbat and korbanot for Chag on the same day. Everything was supposed to be completely compartmentalized, perfectly divided. No, everything is black and white. There's no gray, and that is very much the kind of attitude that Kat Midbar Yehuda took towards life in general. You're either with us or you're our enemy. You're either part of the cut or you're evil. You're either in or you're out. Something is either tameh or tahor. There's no in between. And they lived their lives on this, in this duality, and you can see that the idea of mixing something was completely foreign to them. So in the calendar of Kat Midbar Yehuda, we can already see the shift from counting Sefirat HaOmer as part of the agricultural anticipation of moving from the barley harvest to the wheat harvest, moving away from there to a different kind of counting. And it's only with the gathering together of Mukubalim in Sfat in the 16th century that we have another shift in the character of Sefirat HaOmer, and the Ari initiates the idea of looking at, of building the individual as opposed to the nation on every day of Sefirat HaOmer. And that's the idea that each day, each week belongs to a different one of the process of Sefirat HaOmer, of moving from Pesach to Chag Matan Torah, is a process that the individual should experience as coming closer to Hashem. And that you spend those 7 weeks trying to move through, climb a ladder, as it were, from a ladder of Sefirot, which bring you closer and closer to Malchut Shamayim, to the relationship of subject and monarch between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the first week of Sefirat HaOmer is the week of Chesed, and every day of the Sefirah, you work or you think of another of the qualities, which are qualities of God and qualities of the individual, and you work on those qualities all the way through the week. And it's very interesting that Benjamin Franklin came up with a very similar system when he wanted to work on his character. So he also divided his, very much like Kat Midbar Yehuda, he divided his year into 4 periods, and he had a list of character traits, 13 different character traits that he worked on 3 times during the year. And each time he finished one set of going through the whole system of, he had frugality and I could have brought this all down for you. Attention, like being careful with your money, and not overeating, and all kinds of much more practical things that we tend to put into our midot of Sefirat HaOmer. But he also worked on them through a period of 13 days, three times a year. And as he finished each 13 days, he would start again. And 13 also fits, he made it fit into the number of days in the year, very similar to Kat Midbar Yudah. And Tnuat HaMusar actually picked up on the method that Benjamin Franklin devised and recorded in his autobiography, and used it in Mussar yeshivas to work on refining the character of students all the way through the year. The Aritz focused it in Sefirat HaOmer. So the first week is Chesed, the second week is Gvura, the third week is Netzach, etc., the fourth, until you get to Malchut in the seventh week. And I want to look just for a second for the end of our shiur at the tefillah which the Mekubalim of Tzfat composed to focus us on every day of Sefirat HaOmer on the quality that we're thinking of in that day. And the idea is literally to climb a ladder of character refinement all the way through the 49 days of Sefirat HaOmer, so that when you get to Shavuot, to Chag Matan Torah, you're ready, like Kat Midbar Yudah, to renew your vow, to renew your Shvu'ah, by having refined your character in the mold created by the comparing the midot of a Kadosh Baruch Hu with the midot of a person. So let's look quickly at that. Okay, ריבונו של עולם, אתה ציוויתנו על ידי משה עבדך לספור ספירת העומר. What for? כדי לטהרנו מקליפותינו ומטומאותינו. To purify us of our klipot, of our external trappings, the things which are unnecessary to our lives, ומטומאותינו, and from our impurities. כמו שכתבת בתורתך, just as you wrote in your Torah, and this is this pasuk is repeated from the tefillah that most people say before Sefirat HaOmer as well. כמו שכתבת בתורתך, וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת, and that resonates for us now in a different way. Count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, miyom aviachem et Omer hatnufa, from the day when you bring the Omer offering, sheva Shabbatot tmimot tiyena, ad mimachorat haShabbat hashvi'it tisperu 50 yom, until the day after the seventh Shabbat, count 50 days. Kedei sheyitaharu nafshot amcha Yisrael mizu hamatan, so that the souls of Am Yisrael can be purified from their defilement. ובכן, יהי רצון מלפניך השם אלוקינו ואלוקי אבותינו. May it be your will, שבזכות ספירת העומר שספרתי היום, in the merit of the counting that I've counted today, יתוקן מה שפגמתי בספירה, and today is Hod Shebenetzach. Okay? Let whatever mistakes I've made in the area of Netzach, which we could interpret as thinking about time. Hod Shebenetzach. Hod is one of the hardest sefirot to describe, so I don't have a definition for it, so I'm not going to even go there. But you see, the idea is taking the qualities of every day. יתוקן מה שפגמתי בספירת hod בשבנצח, ואטהר ואתקדש, make me pure and holy, בקדושה של מעלה, with the supernal holiness, ועל ידי זה ישפשט הרב בכל העולמות, bring your emanations into all the worlds, לתקן את נפשותינו, to repair our souls, ברוחותינו ונשמותינו, and our ruach and our neshama, מכל סיג ופגם, from any kind of defect, ולטהרנו ולקדשנו בקדושתך העליונה, and purify and sanctify us with your with your elevated holiness. Amen. So we've gone on a journey today. We've gone on a journey from the Sefirat of the harvest, from one harvest to the next harvest, and from one oath, the oath of Geulah of Pesach, to the oath of Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim, Kabbalat HaTorah at Matan Torah, from the harvest society to the desert society of Kat Midbar Yehuda, to the counting of the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists in Tzfat, who use the ladder of counting these days as a way of not bringing in a physical harvest, but bringing in a spiritual harvest. So when we read that in Kriyat Torah this year, this Shabbat, I think we have a lot of different things to think about. I have gone a little bit over time. I don't want people to be, people who are carrying on with bracha to be late. So thank you very much. And Shabbat Shalom. And hopefully we'll begin to move out as well from having to work maybe in the opposite direction, from being focused on ourselves and our insides for the last, as we have been for the last 2 months, to be able to start going out into the sadeh and seeing the things which are growing and the new plants which are ripening, and be able to move out of confinement into the wider world. Be'ezrat Hashem, hopefully this strange period will soon be behind us, and hopefully Be'ezrat Hashem we shouldn't have to live through it again. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah Jo.
I really want to apologize for the background noise that was going on all the way through the shir. I just couldn't deal with it and keep teaching at the same time. So I just went with it, and I hope that it didn't disturb everybody too much.
No problem.
Okay, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen next week.
It's all good, Sarah Jo. Keep well.
Okay.
Well, everybody. Some of her kids came.